we are concerned with the very fundamental constitutional issue of whether or not the government of the United States can indeed make distinction between citizens on the basis of ancestry or national origin.
Minoru Yasui is a man on a crusade. He implores anyone who will listen to carry on the fight he started 40 years ago. Because of his fight, Yasui was at one time arrested. He was placed in solitary confinement. He was denounced as a spy, and he was stripped of his citizenship. If any American deserves to feel abused by this country's system of justice, it is Min Yasui.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
The mad Japanese dog strikes in the Pacific, and Washington State Department gives the incredible news to reporters who had been awaiting news of peace negotiations with the sly, war-crazed Japs.
Shortly after Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. Everyone of Japanese blood was evacuated from the West Coast. 120,000 people, 2/3 of them American citizens. At the same time, the military imposed a curfew on German, Italian, and Japanese aliens. But because of their physical resemblance to the enemy, the curfew was also applied to American citizens of Japanese descent. Min Yasui was a struggling young attorney in Portland, Oregon. He was certain the curfew as applied to American citizens was unconstitutional. On March 28, 1942, Yasui set out to become a test case. What happened that day?
Actually, about 8 o'clock, I told my secretary to be sure to call the Portland police, the FBI, to tell them a Jap was walking up and down 3rd Avenue in violation of the military curfew order. So I walked these streets 2 or 3, 4 times, as I recall, that evening, trying to get arrested.
After 3 hours, Yasui finally walked to Portland Police headquarters and found a cooperative desk sergeant.
He booked me, and then he had one of the security people throw me into the drunk tank.
Yasui spent the weekend in jail and became front-page news.
My contention, obviously, was if you begin to erode the liberties and freedom and rights of the individual, then you are indeed jeopardizing the safety of our whole nation. That was my position.
The papers had a field day exploiting his one-time employment at the Japanese consulate in Chicago, a perfectly legal job for an American citizen to hold.
Obviously, whenever you have consulates or embassies in foreign countries, you have American citizens who are employed in order to perform the necessary clerical, secretarial, or indeed janitorial work.
Yasui quit the consulate the day Pearl Harbor was invaded, but it was a job which would haunt him in court. In the meantime, Yasui and every other Japanese American living in the Northwest were shipped off to a barren relocation camp on the Idaho desert. At Minidoka, they were held captive behind barbed wire by their own government.
The thing that amazes me so completely is that for 4 years, 10,000 people lived here for 4 years. And now this is all that's left, a few stones.
Minidoka is now farmland. Min Yasui remembers.
You know, the amazing thing comes back. My number was 16263. They didn't tattoo it on me, but 16263.
In a 1942 film, this is how Milton Eisenhower, head of the War Relocation Agency, explained internment.
So the military and civilian agencies alike determined to do the job as a democracy should, with real consideration for the people involved.
The barracks are not completed, the mess halls are not finished, the laundry, the restrooms, the bathhouses were not complete.
Naturally, the newcomers looked about with some curiosity. They were in a new area, on land that was raw, untamed, but full of opportunity.
It was a desolate sight, because as you tear up the desert, the soil pulverizes into dust, and clouds of dust would be streaming everywhere.
Can Min Yasui be considered a hero of sorts?
I think he is considered a hero.
University of Idaho professor Bob Sims is writing a book about Minidoka.
A large number of people are sorry that more people did not challenge, did not offer some kind of resistance to the relocation, and in Minoru Yasui they find someone who did.
After a few months at Minidoka, Yasui came back to Portland for his trial. By way of convoluted legal logic, Yasui was stripped of his citizenship and convicted of violating a military curfew order. The penalty, 9 months in solitary confinement.
You had room enough to take perhaps 2 or 3 steps, then turn around, take 2 or 3 steps back. Cockroaches, you'd chase them, swat them, talk to them.
He appealed his case to the U.S. Supreme Court. The court restored his citizenship, but upheld the principle of wartime curfew and relocation. Min Yasui's crusade didn't end that day. For the last 4 decades, he has been reminding America that internment was a wrong needing to be righted. A congressionally appointed commission is now considering whether to recommend monetary compensation for the victims.
Not because it affected 120,000 Japanese Americans, but it affects all Americans.
Not everyone loves him, but I think, despite that fact, everyone respects him for what he's done.
John Tateishe of the Japanese American Citizens League.
That's why I tell my kids, you've got to know this man. You've got to remember him so that when you're 50 years old, you can think back on the kinds of people you've known in your life. And this man is always going to be an exceptional person to you.
I don't think my faith in America is diminished one whit. I think my idealism, a little tired perhaps, but if I were a youngster, 26 years old, you bet I'd do it again.